Professor Timothy Snyder, in his book on tyranny, written during Trump's first administration, makes a list of 20 rules on how to survive authoritarianism. His number one rule: do not obey in advance. Do not obey in advance. That is the number one rule. He writes, much of the power of authoritarianism is freely given, so resist the urge to anticipate and comply with what a repressive regime might want, unquote. Trump's not even done with his first 100 days, and the compliance in advance we're witnessing in this country, mind-boggling on the part of news organizations settling lawsuits with Trump, law firms offering Trump $100 million each in pro bono work for whatever cause, universities, professors, public figures, all refusing to state the obvious about what Trump and Musk are doing to our institutions and our rule of law. It's all happening at lightning speed. There are those who study the rise of late 20th and early 21st century authoritarian regimes in places like Russia, Poland, Hungary, and they say they have never seen a system buckle so quickly as ours. How bad is it going to get? Just ask Kilmore Abrego Garcia. He's a 29-year-old El Salvadoran immigrant in our country with protected legal status who was accidentally shipped off to a prison in El Salvador. We have a judge ordering ICE, which admits it made a mistake, to bring Garcia home, but a Trump Justice Department refusing that judge's order despite our own Supreme Court ruling this week to facilitate Garcia's return. We have pro-Palestinian college students and professors in this country legally, having violated no laws, getting rounded up by ICE agents wearing masks, and then shipping these college professors and students off to detention centers in Texas and Louisiana, 1,500 miles away from their families. All because Donald Trump disagrees with their speech. More importantly, we have a president who declared unilaterally that our country is in a state of war with the nation of Venezuela. We have a president who has stated Venezuela invaded America, sending marauding gangs into this country to rape and murder innocent civilians. Without a declaration of war from Congress, without a war authorization from Congress, Donald Trump has unilaterally declared America is in a state of war with Venezuela. And therefore, this is a national emergency, entitling Trump, so he claims, to invoke the Alien Enemies Act, not used since World War II to round up Japanese citizens. Donald Trump has invoked the Alien Enemies Act, a war power, to take anyone he decides is an enemy combatant, to take that person off the streets without a trial, without due process, and ship them off to a detention facility in El Salvador in the dead of night. Meanwhile, like so many presidents before him, Trump bombards Houthis in Yemen with airstrikes without permission from Congress, further laying the predicate for our Supreme Court to rule that presidents have the authority to cite an imminent threat and use his wartime powers for anything he deems fit. He can use his war powers in Yemen, as he's doing now on the Houthis, or here in the United States, fighting his imaginary war against Venezuela. You wouldn't know it by watching the news, but we are at war with Venezuela, at least according to Donald Trump. I have no doubt that this Supreme Court will rule in the coming weeks on Trump's invocation of the Alien Enemies Act. I have no doubt that this Supreme Court is going to decide it is up to the president and Congress to declare war on Venezuela, not the Supreme Court. I have no doubt that this Supreme Court will punt. They will rule that the president has declared war on Venezuela. And if Congress wishes to challenge him to revoke that declaration of war, they can vote. Otherwise, the power to make war resides with the president. That is what I believe this Supreme Court is going to rule. They're going to rule that the power to make war resides with Congress and the president. The president, when he acts unilaterally, can keep doing so until Congress says stop. That's going to be their ruling. And the Alien Enemies Act will stay in effect. Every airstrike Obama, Biden, and Trump made without congressional authority, each one of those airstrikes laid the predicate for this Supreme Court to rule in the coming weeks that Donald Trump invoking wartime powers is between Congress and the president. It has nothing to do with us, the Supreme Court. I have no doubt that this court will rule that if Congress doesn't believe we are at war with Venezuela, they are free to vote on that. Does anyone believe Speaker Mike Johnson would so much as even look at a bill challenging Donald Trump's declaration of war against Venezuela or his invocation of the Alien Enemies Act, from which those powers flow? He says we're at war with Venezuela, therefore I have wartime emergency powers. According to Trump, we are at war with Venezuela. Hasn't been 100 days. If the entire system obeys in advance and allows Trump to decide we are in a state of war with Venezuela, what other emergency powers will he claim? I saw Bernie and AOC in Los Angeles today. People are not going to put up with this. We are peacefully going to resist. The courts, we know by now, will not save us. We must organize. We must vote. We must not get arrested. Do not break the law. Do not allow the police to have power over your bodies. Organize, march, vote. Do not, as Professor Timothy Snyder says, obey in advance. So, the question I have for you is, how is it possible that Donald Trump says we are in a state of war with Venezuela, yet nobody's talking about this? One of the challenges to maintaining an informed citizenry is there's no clickbait. There's no money in helping Americans grasp what's actually happening to their country and why it's happening. There's only money in demonizing Trump and his dreadfully compliant Republican toadies. There are eyeballs to be gained from enraging and then scaring listeners into submissive paralysis. There's a lot to be made off terrifying the American people by convincing them they're powerless. As they hope against hope, none of what's going on in Washington, D.C. will end up at their own front doorstep. The big audience, the real money, is in simultaneously outraging Americans while at the same time offering them a sense of self-satisfied contentment that this is all happening to someone else. Plus, come on, there's only so much one person can do. That's the magic formula in today's media landscape. Provide Americans with just enough self-righteous indignation, but not too much moral outrage that they end up canceling their vacation to Sandals Resort because of the way the workers there are treated. Americans are trained to support unions up until the point we might have to alter our lifestyle in order to support those unions. Which brings me to the increasingly irrelevant Bill Maher, who just had dinner at the White House with Trump and came back to tell his HBO audience of several million academic lightweights that he marveled at how human Donald Trump turned out to be. That was Bill Maher's big takeaway after having dined inside the Trump White House. That Donald Trump is a human being. You can't get any more insightful than that. Apparently, Donald Trump laughs, he smiles, he listens. He's not a monster, so says Bill Maher. Now, hold your comments about how you stopped listening to Bill Maher 30 years ago. Of course you did. But while AOC and Bernie Sanders on Saturday played to massive crowds in Los Angeles, upending the Democratic Party's status quo, there are still Democrats like Bill Maher who are counterbalancing Bernie's and AOC's message of inclusion and class struggle with a smug, self-satisfied message that the problem isn't income inequality, it's the cancel culture. You know, my listeners know Bill Maher is full of crap, but he speaks for a large swath of baby boomers inside the Democratic Party who are clueless, who take their cues from Bill Maher, this ill-informed, self-serving weather vane who chases the winds of mammon. Like Trump, Bill Maher only cares about money, success, and himself. And despite my audience knowing Bill Maher's a dope, his show and shows like his are what passes for intellectual discourse and democratic values in our country. So his visit to the Trump White House may not surprise you, but he's done a great disservice to his low-information Democrats who don't know what happened until Bill Maher tells them. It takes a second-rate intellect like Bill Maher's, who's devoid of what the banality of evil means. It takes that kind of intellect to proclaim, relax, America, don't get overheated. I just had dinner with Donald Trump. He's not a monster. He's a human being. If Bill Maher had done any serious reading, instead of modulating his voice to make it sound like he has, Bill Maher would know that one of the great gifts fascists possess is the ability to compartmentalize publicly. It's part of their pathology. No, they are never monsters, Bill, because monsters don't exist. There's no such thing as monsters. Hitler was not a monster. He was a fascist. Fascists are humans who perform monstrous deeds. You might want to watch the movie Zone of Interest, read Hannah Arendt, study serial killers. None of these people are monsters. Yes, they perform monstrous crimes against humanity, but only to return home to their wives and families who couldn't possibly believe Daddy would be capable of such crimes. Trump isn't a monster. Elon Musk isn't a monster. They perform monstrous acts that destroy people and countries. Yes, they can be very charming, great dinner companions, but that too is part of their pathology. It's no great insight, Bill Maher, to tell us Donald Trump isn't a monster. Bill Maher is no different than all the men who said of Harvey Weinstein, "I never saw him rape anyone." It's Prince Andrew, Alan Dershowitz, and Bill Clinton insisting Jeffrey Epstein never molested me as a child. I never saw it. And because Jeffrey put together the most cosmopolitan group of people you can imagine around his dining room table, I found it impossible to resist his company. Do you for 1 second believe Jeffrey Epstein, Harvey Weinstein, Matt Lauer, who used to host the Today Show, or Les Moonves, who ran CBS? Do you believe these rapists are monsters? Monsters don't exist. They're rapists. They were incredibly charming sociopaths, just like Donald Trump, who can be incredibly fun to be around. George W. Bush is supposedly one of the kindest, most charming people in the world. He'd have to be, wouldn't he? Millions of dead Iraqis, all because George W. Bush knowingly lied his way into that illegal invasion. Is George W. Bush a monster? No, he's a war criminal. War criminals exist. Monsters don't. Bill Maher is a power-hungry imbecile who read one book in his life, said, "That's enough, I'm done, I'm smart," and he thinks that gaining access to power is the same as gaining insight. He traffics in 8th grade platitudes like, "Shouldn't we be talking with the other side?" That's over. I'm done talking with fascists. Shouldn't we be communicating with crypto Nazis? No, Bill, we should be defeating them. Bill Maher doesn't think Donald Trump is a crypto fascist. Maher literally said Friday on his show after dining at the Berchtesgaden with Donald Trump that there are 2 Trumps. The one I saw inside the White House and the one Trump presents to the world. Well, the Trump you saw, Bill Maher, isn't the problem. That's the same Trump that Ivanka sees. Makes her love her daddy. The Trump the rest of us get to see, the Trump that Trump presents to the world, that's the problem. Not the frothy dinner companion. Hitler was a wonderful host. If you visited the bunker, he laughed at your jokes, made sure your glasses were full, probably with cyanide, and then asked about your kids and asked if they were thirsty. Very rarely did anybody leave one of Hitler's dinner parties complaining about the portions. He was a wonderful host. Bill Maher's normalization of Trump is precisely why Americans are so ill-informed. For these so-called renegades like Bill Maher, or those incredibly popular podcast hosts, access is more important than the truth for these truth tellers. Personally, I don't want Donald Trump to come on this show. Not that he would, but I don't consider it a feather in my cap to have Donald Trump on this show. Who cares what he has to say? I care what he's doing. The less time people in the media spend with the rich and powerful, the safer we all are. The problem is the media has become rich and powerful. They love access. It makes them stupid, like Bill Maher. Proximity to power first blinds and then bends. It blinds you and then it bends you. They always say don't meet your heroes. I say don't meet your enemies. They soften you. I knew people who met George W. Bush during the Iraq invasion and said to me, "You should meet him." And I would say, "I don't want to. I don't want to be charmed by a sociopath." Bill Maher is now one of Donald Trump's useful idiots. The half-wits in the Democratic Party who watch Bill Maher, who trust him, now think Trump can be, for lack of a better word, appeased. Now, Trump is a mortal threat to our planet. He's not a monster. Neither was Meyer Lansky, Vito Genovese, Frank Costello, Bugsy Siegel, Carlos Gambino, unless, of course, you got in their way. These were family men. Maybe not Bugsy Siegel, but these were family men. I'm sure Bill Maher and Trump found a lot of common ground while they dined inside the White House. There's a lot they have in common: an addiction to power, money, and an open animus for women and Muslims. There is no cancel culture, because if there were, Bill Maher would have been canceled 15 years ago for what he's been saying about Muslims. Now is not the time for negotiating with or humanizing fascists. We know who these people are. There's nothing I need to hear them say other than, "I surrender." But that's how people like Bill Maher make their money. Convincing their audiences that, yeah, the stakes are high, just not too high. Certainly not too high for the chronically high Bill Maher, a white Christian heterosexual male with a private plane to jet out of Dodge should his number ever come up. He is rich. He is rich. He was able to give $1 million to Obama. He owned the New York Mets. He is rich. He's not a truth teller. He wants to be richer. He's not on your side, America. Anybody who can afford to buy a piece of the Mets and give Obama $1 million is not on your side. Is easily co-opted by people like Donald Trump. The one who brokered this summit between Bill Maher and Donald Trump was none other than public intellectual Kid Rock. Kid Rock, who, according to Rolling Stone magazine, proudly and unapologetically peppers his speech with the N-word. Do you hang out with people who use the N-word? Do you hang out with white people who use the N-word? Do you? Well, that hasn't kept Kid Rock from doing Bill Maher's show, nor, more importantly, from being one of his closest friends. So close, Kid Rock arranged this dinner with Donald Trump. Maybe there's a twisted logic to somehow forgiving a white man's flagrant use of the N-word. I know there are some white men who think of themselves as honorary blacks who have earned the right to use the N-word. They haven't. But whether they're justified is not the point. The point is Kid Rock is not one of those white men. Kid Rock is not an honorary black man. He hasn't earned, nobody has earned the right to use the N-word. Certainly not Kid Rock, who 10 years ago, after Dylan Roof shot up a black church in Charleston, South Carolina, killing 9, waved the Confederate flag with abandon during his concerts, as he had been doing in the past. Back after Dylan Roof killed those innocent churchgoers, black, inside Charleston, South Carolina, that church, it was generally agreed that maybe Kid Rock should stop waving the Confederate flag at his concerts, to which Kid Rock said, quote unquote, "Kiss my ass." But in Bill Maher's pickled brain, Kid Rock saying "kiss my ass" to the people wanting him to stop waving the Confederate flag wasn't racist. It was standing up to the cancel culture. Because charlatans like Bill Maher have always been more concerned about protecting the careers of racists from being destroyed by getting canceled than he is in protecting the victims of those performers' racism. He cares more about the racist than the victims of the racists. The Confederate flag is a physical manifestation of the N-word. So, is Kid Rock allowed to wave the Confederate flag at one of his concerts? I guess, legally, I guess. But why would you? It's a symbol of hatred up there with the swastika. Is it morally repugnant? Yeah. Does he have the right to do it? I guess. But do I have the right to tell people not to buy any of Kid Rock's music because of his racism? According to Bill Maher, no. In Bill Maher's twisted world, the problem isn't Kid Rock using his First Amendment rights to say racist things. The problem is people like me using my First Amendment rights to attack Kid Rock for saying racist things. In Bill Maher's world, the problem isn't the racist speaking freely. The problem is the woke vigilante using his First Amendment rights to make racism less profitable for people like Kid Rock. Nobody is saying put Kid Rock in prison for saying the N-word or for waving the Confederate flag. We're saying don't give him your money. The Supreme Court ruled in Citizens United that money is speech. So is withholding money. That's speech too. Boycotts are a protected form of speech. And there is why Donald Trump is so comfortable around. That's why Bill Maher is so comfortable around Kid Rock and Donald Trump. Bill Maher said of his dinner with Trump at the White House, "The great thing about dinner with Donald Trump was I didn't have to walk around on eggshells worrying about what I said." Really, Bill? Really? Trump sued you for $5 million back in 2013 after you made a joke about Trump's mother having sex with an orangutan. Now, Bill Maher is very wealthy. He's a survivor. And from his point of privilege, he figures if I'm wealthy enough to survive one of Trump's $5 million lawsuits, then anyone should be. Bill Maher is a self-serving fool. He claims to be against the cancel culture, unaware he was dining inside the cancel culture's very own command control center, Donald Trump's White House. While Bill Maher is saying, I didn't have to walk on eggshells worrying about what I said in front of Donald Trump is busy suing ABC News, CBS News, countless other news organizations, and White House staffers over what they said about him. You have to walk on nothing but eggshells when you're talking to Donald Trump. When it comes to free speech and Bill Maher saying I didn't have to walk on eggshells while dining with Donald Trump, that meant I didn't have to worry about saying something racist, homophobic, or sexist. That's what he meant. But that other stuff, even you, Bill Maher, with all your money, might want to be careful. Trump now has about 10 big corporate law firms agreeing to perform close to $1 billion in pro bono work for his causes. One of his causes, Bill Maher, could be you. Remember, the mafia only goes after its own. They also go after other people. But so, to my foreign listeners, when you find yourself gobsmacked at how civically illiterate the American people have become, it's precisely because of truth-tellers like Bill Maher, who make more money they can possibly spend lulling their audiences, Democrats, into a smug complacency, into a warm surrender, convinced they're informed just enough to be outraged, but not too outraged to get alarmed and actually do anything about it. To paraphrase Noam Chomsky, Bill Maher is paid by HBO to manufacture consent by convincing his audience that they're more politically attuned than they actually are. I know people who say, well, I don't always agree with Bill Maher, but he does speak his truth. Bill Maher's truth is amassing more money, feeding his own bottomless pit of need in order to appear more relevant than he actually is. And that's a huge swath of the Democratic leadership. There are a lot of people in the Democratic leadership who agree with Bill Maher and are Bill Maher. This is not the time to break bread with fascists. This is not the time to point out the human side of fascists. We have arrived at an all-hands-on-deck moment. We've been here before. And some of us will survive to say, oh, it was bad, but somehow we got through it. No, you got through it. You got through it. History is judging us the way we were judged during McCarthyism. History, Bill Maher, reveres Edward R. Murrow for exposing McCarthy, not having dinner with McCarthy and proclaiming he's not a monster. History judges us. During the civil rights movement of the 60s, you were either marching with Dr. King or going on Bill Buckley's show Firing Line and saying it's all happening too fast, black people aren't ready. That's what Bill Buckley said. This country has always been preyed upon by dark and sinister forces who facilitate evil. What appeasers, what collaborators like Bill Maher don't get is there's a difference between evil people and evil deeds. I don't believe people are evil. Trump is not evil. His deeds are. It's why I believe in redemption and why I don't believe in the death penalty. There are innumerable civilized societies right now that draw a distinction between evil people and evil deeds. Prisons in those countries are restorative, but here in America, our prisons are punitive. We believe people are evil. We believe that evil people can't be changed. Look at how we delight in that El Salvadoran torture chamber. Is that anything but punitive? Is there anything restorative about that torture chamber? And so we demonize individuals. We create monsters, even though monsters are a fiction. What happens here in America, if you believe in a woman's right to choose, if you believe in abortion, that makes you evil. It's not good enough for abortion to be evil. The people who believe in it must also be evil. That's what makes it easier to assassinate an abortion doctor or blow up a clinic. These people are trained to believe your political enemies are evil, not their actions. My father told me one of the hardest parts of coming home after World War II was suddenly learning that the Japanese and the Germans weren't evil. He was trained to kill the Japanese and the Germans, and the way you train them is they're evil, not their government, not what they believe, they're evil. By dining with Trump, by declaring he's not a monster, Bill Maher opens up the possibility for middle-of-the-road, well-heeled Democrats to believe if Trump's not a monster, if he himself isn't evil, then what he's doing can't be monstrously evil. That's the problem we have in America. It's why Trump convinced so many people to storm the Capitol. He demonizes the other side. He calls his opponents evil. Not their beliefs. The people are evil. He says we are up against evil. Not evil ideas, not monstrous ideas, evil people. So Bill Maher, by declaring Trump isn't a monster, he opens the door for dusty, old, tired white men, people like Bill Maher, to believe Trump's ideas, his policies aren't evil. Again, MAGA Republicans are not evil. Their policies are, which is why you don't have dinner with them. You stay away from them. You don't try to find common ground. There is no common ground. There is no hashing things out over dinner. There's only winning at the ballot box. Donald Trump is a fascist, and fascism is evil. Joe Biden, before leaving office, literally called Donald Trump what he is, a fascist. We have never, in modern American history, had a president call the leader of the opposing party a fascist. Mark Milley, who was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff through most of Trump's first term, now says repeatedly that Donald Trump is a full-blown fascist. Never before in the history of this country has our top general called his former commander-in-chief a full-bore fascist, full-blown fascist. Fascism is becoming more popular in our country than anyone is willing to admit. Anne Applebaum studies the rise and fall of 21st century authoritarian states and writes for The Atlantic magazine. This week she had a piece entitled, "This is Why Dictatorships Fail." And dictatorships eventually fail. They always do, because only stupid people gravitate to dictators. They bring a lot of people down along the way, but they eventually fail. Anne Applebaum writes in this piece called "This is Why Dictatorships Fail," quote, "In recent years, many people who live in democracies have become frustrated by their political systems, by the endless wrangling, the difficulty of creating compromise, the slow pace of decisions. Just as in the first half of the 20th century, would-be authoritarians have begun arguing that we would all be better off without these institutions." She goes on to write, "Mussolini said, quote, 'The truth is that men are tired of liberty.'" She goes on to say that Lenin spoke with scorn about the failings of so-called bourgeois democracy. She writes, "In the United States, a brand new school of techno-authoritarian thinkers find our political system inefficient and want to replace it with a national CEO, a dictator by a different name," unquote. That's Anne Applebaum writing in The Atlantic. Trump is stupid, but there are intellectual undergirdings to this crypto-fascism. Many of these crypto-fascists are coming out of Silicon Valley. They have a firm belief that Americans are too stupid to govern themselves. I've talked about these people, and I realized that they're bubbling to the surface quicker than I expected. People like Peter Thiel, one of the founders of PayPal, along with Elon Musk, also one of the founders of PayPal, quietly, and now not so quietly, subscribe to what is called the Dark Enlightenment. The Dark Enlightenment, or the neo-reactionary movement. It's fascism. One of the doyens is a creep named Curtis Yarvin, who found himself the belle of the ball at Trump's second inauguration, where that other disciple of the Dark Enlightenment, J.D. Vance, went out of his way to greet Curtis Yarvin by shouting, "Yarvin, you reactionary fascist," unquote. And they both laughed. Yarvin responded by saying, "Thank you, Mr. Vice President." It was a joke, and it wasn't. It was a joke that was dismissive of who they really are. They are reactionary fascists, just by other names. Yarvin fancies himself a public intellectual, just like J.D. Vance. Both men have made a considerable amount of money feeding off Silicon Valley. Elon Musk, as I just said, is also part of this dark enlightenment, just like J.D. Vance, like Yarvin, as is Mark Andreessen, who invented the first real internet browser. I believe it was called Netscape. And he used the fortune from Netscape, I think it's called Netscape, he used that fortune to start a Silicon Valley venture capital firm that jump-started Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. You do not want to go up against Mark Andreessen. He's one of the big investors in Silicon Valley. He's a technocrat who probably won't admit it, but if you get a couple of drinks into him, will admit he doesn't believe in representative democracy. These people who I've been talking about all have a heightened and delusional sense of self-importance. They believe the world, the economy, is far too complicated for ordinary Americans to have a say in the affairs of state. These people are, in fact, mental defectives with deep-seated psychosexual inadequacies whose blistered souls render them incapable of trusting anyone other than malevolent bullies like themselves. Are they evil? No. Are they monsters? No. What they believe is evil and monstrously dangerous. They are nothing new. Nothing new. They are fascists. They can call it the Dark Enlightenment, but they are fascists. There have always been Americans who believe too much democracy is a bad thing. I believe our founding fathers said that. That's why they gave us a Senate and the Electoral College and deprived voting rights to blacks, women, as well as people who didn't own land. MAGA Republicans didn't invent voter suppression. It's baked into our foundational documents. During the 1930s, the Great Depression gave rise to what became known as the technocracy movement. The technocracy movement, which warned that advances in science had become too profound for ordinary citizens to fully grasp what's going on. Thus, representative democracy should be replaced by what they called a technocracy, a meritocracy, if you will, of high-achieving academics, inventors, and business leaders who would employ the scientific method to arrive at the proper solution to all our nation's social ills. When you hear this creep, Curtis Yarvin, speak, he talks about wanting a merit-based aristocracy. He isn't shy about calling for a king. Some of these people are worth tens of millions of dollars, others worth tens of billions. They don't worry about income inequality. Actually, they do worry. They worry that income inequality is going to be addressed. The Dark Enlightenment, these fascists, they're part of a political philosophy in search of phony problems. The proponents of this anti-democratic aristocracy, meritocracy, don't want to come up with a utilitarian solution so all Americans can gain access to clean air and water, free health care, free education, safe and affordable housing, and access to leisure time with jobs that pay enough for them to spend 8 hours a day doing something other than busting their ass. These people, by the way, have not just infiltrated the Republican Party, they have poisoned Democrats. Now, it's in the Democratic Party, they don't know they've been poisoned. You can hear it, though, in the centrist Democrats who talk about the opportunity economy. When Democrats talk about an opportunity economy, you know that some of this toxicity from the Dark Enlightenment has bled into the Democratic Party. It is precisely why Kamala Harris lost. She got into bed with Mark Cuban, the billionaire, who won't admit it, but let's just say he's dark enlightenment curious. Instead of AOC and Bernie, they promised an opportunity economy where everyone has a shot at the American dream. That sounds almost good. But it is an evil political position for Democrats to hold. Giving everyone a shot at the American dream means they get to say, the people in charge get to say, hey, we gave you a chance, and some of you succeeded, some of you didn't, but you can't say we didn't give you a shot at the American dream. This is the problem with the meritocracy inside the Democratic Party. People like Bill and Hillary Clinton, Barack and Michelle Obama, the Pelosi's, the Schumers, Kamala Harris, not Joe Biden, right? Not Bernie, not AOC. And that's one of the reasons Joe Biden got dumped. He was not talking about the opportunity economy. He was openly saying we have to create jobs that don't require a college education. The people like the Clintons, the Obamas, Kamala Harris, Pelosi, Schumer, these high achievers went and sent their kids to the best schools. They believe the American dream. They take it upon themselves to define the American dream as academic and economic success. That's what the Democratic leadership, except AOC, Bernie, and Biden, are selling. The opportunity economy. It's why they lose the working class vote. Half this country can't pay for a medical emergency. Half this country living paycheck to paycheck. Most Americans don't care about having a shot at the American dream, or at least Kamala Harris's version of the American dream. Most Americans care about having a roof over their heads. And who the F are Democrats? Who are Bill and Hillary, Barack and Michelle, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, or Kamala Harris? Where do they get off telling us what the American dream is? That's your dream. Your dream is academic and economic dominance over others. That's not my American dream. My American dream is to live a quiet life free from the fear of danger and want. The Democratic Party will keep losing so long as it continues to be the champion of the very same meritocracy, the very same illiberal, anti-democratic poison that infects MAGA Republicans and the dark Enlightenment. It's why the only Democratic voices that actually know how to stand up to Trump are Bernie and AOC. They are the real opposition. Everybody else in the Democratic Party, there's some exceptions, sound like fools. Fools. They remind me, when I hear Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, they remind me of closeted gay men who are married and they tell their wives, you need to lose weight. That's why we're not having sex. That's what the Democratic leadership, and the closeted gay man actually believes that. That's who Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Hakeem Jeffries, Kamala Harris, they are closeted gay men lying to themselves in an asexual relationship with their wives, telling their wives the problem is you're unattractive, you need to lose weight. They won't deal with the truth of who the Democratic Party used to be and needs to become again. Now, Trump didn't win by anything resembling a landslide. It's not too late to make a correction. This Democratic leadership isn't willing to say or do what needs to be said and done. Until they do, we're at the mercy of the courts, and the courts are at the mercy of Trump. This Democratic leadership, starting today, needs to say, increase the minimum wage. You need to call for federally funded, affordable, or free housing. Free, nutritious breakfast, lunch, and dinner for every child inside every public school, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, no means testing. Children eat for free. Bill Gates' grandchildren are just as welcome as a child living on the streets. No, you're a kid, you're under the age of 18, here's a free meal. Free tuition at all public universities and community colleges. Free child care. Not for-profit child care. Free child care inside our public schools. Expand Head Start. Have public schools start when a kid is 1 year old. Don't make it mandatory. Make it optional. But if you choose, you can drop your kid off at your local public school at the age of 1, enroll them. It's free. Have kindergarten start at the age of 1. And, of course, Medicare for all. Not affordable health insurance, as the Democrat. That was Kamala's platform. Affordable health insurance. Free health care. That's what Americans want. That's the American dream. They don't want a false sense of academic and economic supremacy, status over others. They don't want to dominate their neighbor. They're also tired of being told we live in the wealthiest country in the history of civilization, and yet they, the voters, and their government can't pay its bills. So, in America, unlike Canada, unlike Europe, we are up against a special kind of hyper-individualistic elitist, broken people who can't imagine a world where people don't live in a constant state of competition and panic about their status. I don't think the Clintons, I don't think that success made them particularly happy. I'm not so sure. I love the Obamas. I'm not so sure it made them particularly happy. It made them rich. Elon Musk's maternal grandfather, Joshua Haldeman, living in Canada during the 30s and 40s, became one of the leaders of Technocracy Incorporated, which championed, in part, the notion of scientocracy, where only the wisest among us should decide, especially a nation's fate. Technocracy Incorporated was eventually banned in Canada during World War II because it sided with the fascists who, if you don't remember, Canada and the United States were fighting at the time. Musk's grandfather, Joshua Haldeman, was jailed in Canada for his subversive beliefs. He was denied entrance into the United States during World War II after having been identified not just as a fascist, but a racist, anti-Semitic Nazi sympathizer. In 1950, Elon Musk's maternal grandfather, Joshua Haldeman, moved his family to South Africa, not in spite, but rather because of apartheid. Apartheid was just getting started in South Africa. On South Africa's apartheid, Musk's grandfather told a reporter after just arriving, quote, "Instead of the government's attitude keeping me out of South Africa, it had precisely the opposite effect. It encouraged me to come and settle here." He was a champion of apartheid. He came to South Africa for the apartheid. In an article for a Canadian newspaper about his newfound country, Musk's grandfather, Joshua Haldeman, he wrote an article for a Canadian newspaper, I think in Saskatchewan, I'm not sure. And he praised South Africa, how blacks were being subjugated by South Africa's oppressive apartheid regime. He wrote, quote, "The natives," right there, right? "The natives are very primitive and must not be taken seriously. Some are quite clever in a routine job, but the best of them cannot assume responsibility and will abuse authority. The present government of South Africa knows how to handle the native question," unquote. That's Elon Musk's grandfather. This belief in science, technology, this illiberal faith in meritocracy and disdain for representative democracy, it is nothing new to Elon Musk, who grew up in South Africa with a grandfather preaching much of what we're hearing from the current crop of neo-reactionary fascists like that creep Curtis Yarvin, Mark Andreessen, J.D. Vance, and another product of South Africa, Peter Thiel. The Guardian has written extensively about the South African PayPal mafia. J.D. Vance and Elon Musk have openly embraced the neo-Nazis who run the Alliance for Germany party in Germany. The two men traffic in racist tropes, the very same tropes that kept Musk's grandfather out of the United States and eventually fleeing to the friendlier climate of apartheid South Africa. Elon Musk's grandfather, Joshua Haldeman's life, sadly, was cut short. The man who believed that only the intelligent can be trusted, sitting at the control board. He died at the age of 72 after the wheels of his plane he was piloting got tangled in some power lines. So much for his self-perceived meritocracy. Hardly an aeronautic virtuoso when you can't even keep your landing wheels away from some power lines. Not exactly Charles Lindbergh. And this is what is going to happen. Our wheels are going to get tangled in the power lines if we allow the self-appointed technocrats, merocrats, aristocrats to replace representative democracy. Don't get arrested. Don't break the law. Save your country. Ask, why are we in a state of war with Venezuela? That's the big question. And why, if we are in a state of war with Venezuela, is this not the biggest story? I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Thank you for listening to this. Please like the episode so I remain in your feed. Please share it. This is not the kind of stuff that, it's not for everybody. So please share it. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the chat room for keeping the conversation civil. If I got anything wrong, please correct me in the comment section. Leave a comment. I read all your comments. Don't use AI to correct me. You use Google. Asking AI a question, it's inaccurate. It's inaccurate. Check your sources before you correct me. I don't mind being corrected, but just don't ask ChatGPT. Google it. Do a little research. Okay, thank you.